Allagash Wilderness Waterway is a remote, wild, and historic waterway and one of America's preeminent canoe trips. From the summit of Mount Katahdin, you see the Allagash Wilderness Waterway stretching northward as far as the eye can see. It is one of the last remaining wilderness frontiers on the Eastern Seaboard. Located in the North Woods of Maine, the Allagash Wilderness Waterway's 92 miles meanders through protected lakes, ponds, and streams. While it was designated the Allagash Wilderness Waterway in 1966, its history began long before. Henry David Thoreau visited in 1857, guided by two natives of the Penobscot Tribe. He chronicled his journey in his book, The Maine Woods. Thoreau said, "Here was traveling of the old heroic kind over an unaltered face of nature. Although some of the landscape has changed by logging, today's adventurers come to the Allagash to reconnect with nature by challenging themselves physically and mentally across Class II whitewater and wind-blown lakes. If done correctly, the Allagash will help us reconnect with our past while rejuvenating our present and have us longing to return in the future." There are 8 lakes and 4 ponds within the waterway, and well over 100 tributary brooks and streams that flow into them, and the river. We set out to follow the classic Allagash canoe trip by traveling north from Chamberlain Lake to Allagash Village. We planned to paddle the 92 miles in approximately 8 days, putting in on a Friday afternoon and taking out on the following Saturday morning. My adventure started one day earlier in western New York. I drove with Ken, a fellow raft guide. With Millinocket, Maine being about 12 hours from Buffalo, we decided to drive partway to Ken's brother's house in New Hampshire, where we were treated to homemade paella. We met Paul and Jack, also raft guides, at Frederica's Restaurant and Big Moose Bar before heading out on the Golden Road to our put-in. We got our first glimpse of Mount Katahdin rising up from its flat surroundings. I'll be climbing this mountain on Sunday after takeout. Just seeing it made me very excited. We arrived at the Telos checkpoint, where we paid for our camping permits, about $100, and received our Allagash Wilderness Waterway maps. Our next stop is put in at the boat launch and ranger station at the Chamberlain Bridge. We unpacked our gear and checked in with the ranger on duty. He said the river is moving really good at about 1,300 CFS. It should be a fun paddle. The group's excitement was extremely high, hoping we did not forget any gear as we took one last picture with Mount Katahdin in the background. We set off under the Chamberlain Bridge on a short paddle to our first camp. The winds were in our face, making it more difficult. Paul had warned us that most of the time, the wind is blowing at you on the lakes, rarely helping. We arrived at our first camp, Rocky Cove, after about a 2-hour paddle. We set up camp and looked forward to the steak dinner brought by Paul. Steak is his traditional Allagash kickoff meal.
Oh, that's good.
We enjoyed our dinner, talked about the next day's paddle, and enjoyed our first sunset. The goal for the first full day of paddling was to travel across Chamberlain Lake to Lock Dam, where there is a short portage. After the dam, there's a tributary that flows into Eagle Lake. We had hoped to see the ruins of the Lombard log haulers before setting up camp on the northern reaches of Eagle Lake. The mornings are early on the Allagash. The birds started chirping at 4 a.m., and the sun began lighting our camp by 4:30. We broke camp by 7:30 in hopes to beat any afternoon winds. As we paddled away from shore, the lake waters did not seem too challenging. As we paddled further to the middle of the lake and across to the Lock Dam, the winds picked up. Luckily, it was a crosswind, which made a normally boring flat water paddle interesting and enjoyable. This is kind of part of the trip that I was not too excited about. I remember when I did my Adirondack trip, the lakes are so big and long, it's just relentless paddling, and this is a really big lake. It was kind of fun ferrying across into the waves, and now that we've rounded the point, we've got about 3 miles to go, and the good thing is I think the wind's going to be kind of helping us on this leg. After a short portage, we finally got into some moving water after the dam. I quickly figured out that my 15-foot Wilderness Systems kayak does not turn quite as quickly as my whitewater boats. My anxiety level increased slightly for what awaits us after the Churchill Dam. We stopped quickly at Breezy Island for lunch and understood where it got its name. This did not bode well for the rest of our journey on Eagle Lake. As we passed Pillsbury Island, where Henry David Thoreau made camp in 1857, we entered the bigger part of the lake and the winds. Due to the winds, Paul and I went ahead in our kayaks to find the trails leading to the train routes. Our biggest mistake was not fully communicating our plans with Ken and Jack. So I'm not 100% sure what just happened. We were looking for the locomotives. I went ahead a little bit and had it on my Google map. It was on the pin, and I luckily cached it as an offline map. Jack came to get me, and Paul went out to get Ken, and now they're paddling away from us. We were thinking of paddling to this island and setting up camp, but it looks like they're going even farther, so me and Jack are trying to catch up with them. The group got separated. Ken headed toward the middle of the lake, not knowing where the ruins were located. I continued to look while Paul went to talk with Jack and Ken. Next thing I knew, Jack was paddling toward me, and Ken and Paul were heading toward the north end of the lake and Farm Island. Ken and Paul were paddling out of sight. Jack and I agreed to abort our search for the trains and paddle toward Paul and Ken. What's up, guys?
We were wondering, so did you find it?
My Google Maps cached on my phone, and it has it there. I was in the area of where it was.
Hard to find.
But then I paddled back to get Jack, and then we were losing sight of you guys. So
okay.
The question right now is, you guys are good with keeping going?
How you feel, Jack?
Done.
Huh?
Done.
Done?
Done.
You don't want to go anymore?
Sleeping.
It's all downhill. It's all downhill now.
We can get some quick food and head out, or we could stay here. I guess that's...
Yeah, I mean, I'm good to keep going, but, you know, yesterday I was the one who stopped the trip, so you want to stop it.
Why don't we go up and just talk about it for a few minutes?
Jack was tired, but agreed to paddle a bit farther. So we pressed on to find camp closer to Little Eagle Lake. Jack paddled ahead with a renewed vigor, but beached his canoe at a camp called Pump Handle. He was done for the day, and the group respected this. It was a great place for me to stop because there was a hiking trail called Lookout that started from our campsite. So we got to where we're going to set up camp today. Pump Handle is what it's called, and it's on Eagle Lake, or Little Eagle Lake. I'm not sure which one we're on, but take a look at how awesome this campsite is. Ken's tent set up. That's his view in the morning. Unbelievable. These campsites are awesome. And if we come over here, take a look at, Jack's got his one-man tent set up. And I'll take a look at what we get over here. We got a bar to hang a tarp, awesome fire, and a park bench to sit in front of the fire. Look at that view. Can't beat that. Now I'm going to show you my tent. I got oceanfront property too. All right, my tent's right over here. Take a look at that. That's what I'm going to wake up to tomorrow morning. How awesome is that? The menu for day 2 was kielbasa and Jack's wife's homemade sauerkraut and homemade mustard. After we filled our bellies, Paul and Ken joined me on the hike to the lookout. From the map, it looked like there might be a fire tower on top. It was a pretty short hike that ended at an amazing lookout on top of Eagle Lake. We could see where we came from and where we were heading. We later learned that the fire tower was actually dismantled a few years back. We enjoyed the last of our cold beers before calling it a night. Day 3's original goal was to get to the Churchill Dam before noon and then run Chase Rapids. They turn off the dam release at noon. It was a lofty goal with 3 hours of lake paddling to get to the dam. A ranger passed us on the way and said we needed to get there closer to 11 a.m. to load our gear. Needless to say, our pace with the winds did not get us there on time. So we set up camp short of the dam at the Jaws. It was just as well. We learned from the same ranger that there was an active rescue in Chase Rapids and the dam was shut down. Even if we got there on time, we would have had to wait until the next day to actually run the rapids. We broke camp early with intentions of getting to the dam on time. We encountered wind. It was not in our face, but it also was not helping. Paul told me at starting this trip, if you don't see a moose, I'll buy you a steak dinner and beer. And he said pretty much every time he's done this, he's seen between 8 and 34 moose, which is amazing. I have never seen a moose, so I'm excited to see one. We have a possible sighting across the lake. We saw 2 large objects moving in the water. Looked like a moose, but too far away to confirm. Still waiting for the first sighting. After meeting the ranger on the water, we lowered our expectations of getting to the dam on time. Our spirits were definitely lifted with our first confirmed moose sighting. Right there, so cool. Moose. Yep. Yes. I don't see any. He's pretty little. We pulled into camp early enough to leisurely set up camp and make dinner. After steak and kibasas the first 2 nights, it was now time to turn to camp food, beef stroganoff for me. We relaxed and enjoyed a beautiful sunset as we went to bed, excited to run the rapids tomorrow. Day 4 begins with a short paddle to the Churchill Dam. After a short portage, we entered about 9 miles of Class 2 whitewater, with the first quarter mile or so being pretty continuous rapids. We then traveled down the river to Umsaskis Lake, past the ranger station, and set up camp at Pine Camp between Umsaskis and Long Lakes. Today is what we have been waiting for. Paul has been talking up the Chase Rapids for quite a while. We're approaching the dam. We got the portage around it. We're gonna pay the ranger to take our gear to the end of the 9 miles of whitewater. Much better doing it without a heavy boat. I'm still a little nervous with this longer boat. I'm used to a more nimble whitewater boat, so we'll see how I can maneuver through. The ranger said it's kind of a rock garden in some areas, so I'm a little nervous. Jack is also nervous. He's done Letchworth once in his canoe, and this is going to be kind of his second whitewater attempt, so he's nervous. Ken, as we know, is an awesome canoeist. He's probably going to take the lead. Not too worried about him. And Paul, I don't think he's done whitewater in a kayak. He's got a little shorter boat than me, so he's used to doing it in a canoe, so I think he'll be okay, but we'll see. I'm kind of interested to see what kind of whitewater this actually is. I guess the first quarter mile is pretty fast moving and pretty fun, so I'm looking forward to it. We had a very short paddle to the Churchill Dam. We met the junior ranger that we spoke to the night before and his boss. For $10, they shuttled all of our gear to the end of the Chase Rapids. It's a big advantage for us to run, not being loaded down with gear. It's also a big plus for the rangers because they don't have to chase gear down the river if we flip and need assistance. After we loaded up our gear in the ranger's truck, we visited the barn. Sorry, my poor attempt at a Maine accent. Where we saw a battue and a Lombard steam log hauler in this cool thing called the velocipede. Now it was time for Chase Rapids. We're just ready to go into Chase Rapids. Ken's gonna lead us through. Jack, we'll go right behind Ken. Just leave that over the side. Just leave that. Me and Paul will bring up the rear. Just in case. We're looking forward to it. Yeah, okay. Looks like a good run.
I wouldn't do that either.
No. Jack, how you feeling?
What I told him.
You ready?
Yeah.
You ready? All right. Let's do it. Chase Rapids was an amazing run. Ken said it was one of the nicest stretches of river he has ever run. Coming from him, it is quite meaningful. We ran that 9 miles in a bit over an hour. We were happy to see our gear at the end and marveled at the crew behind us. They had a ton of gear. They had to have a dozen boats to carry it. So Jack, how was it?
It's good. I'm glad I did it. It was all right. It was awesome.
You did well through there. That was fun.
A couple of times I thought I was gonna go over there, but you know.
You didn't.
I did it.
You stayed dry. Yep. And in your boat.
Yep.
The most important parts, right?
Yep. Once we get it to where we're having lunch, I think I'll flip it over and take an inspection on it.
Yeah.
See how bad man, I hit a couple of good rocks in there, man. It were really big. I was like, oh God.
We were treated to another moose sighting before stopping at the Meadows camp for lunch. We decided to paddle the length of Umsaskis Lake. The wind started off cross, but it got a little dicey around the point before settling. We decided to make camp at Pine, one of the nicest camps of the trip.
Time you guys cleaned up.
I got soap and shampoo in my bag.
This incredible day was capped off by a young moose strolling past our camp.
Oh. He was gonna come back.
And then we were visited by a snowshoe hare. The goal of day 5 was to paddle to Round Pond and set up camp near the trailhead of the Tower Trail, a 5-mile round-trip hike to a fire tower I was hoping to bang out. We made it to the Tower Trail camp. However, it was on the small side, but unoccupied. We decided to paddle to the next camp, Round Pond Rips. Unfortunately, it was occupied. Due to some miscommunication and group dynamics, we continued down to the end of Round Pond, only to find several other camps occupied. At this point, we had no choice but to continue down the river to Croquet Brook, a decision we would later all regret. It was about this time we really settled into a routine. Instead of email and Zoom meetings, it's breaking down camp and coffee by the water. We broke camp at about 8:45 to paddle to Long Lake. It was long. Luckily, the winds were not all that bad. We met up with the first people we saw on the trip other than rangers. They traveled even farther than we did to paddle this historic waterway. It was a family of 4, a couple of cousins, and a grandpa from Colorado Springs. After talking for a bit and some more paddling, we reached Long Lake Dam. It is in ruins and looks like it could be runnable on the left side.
It looks inviting to just run it. Looks like there's a pretty good channel on the far side. The drop isn't too bad. I'd think about it in a whitewater boat, maybe in the boat I got right now, but I got gear and we're seeing some logs with spikes. So it's just not worth tearing up my boat or tearing up myself this far into the wilderness. It looks like it would be a pretty cool run though.
From the dam, we could see a large cow moose in the middle of the river, right where we needed to paddle. We all got real close, but Ken definitely got the best view. This was a beautiful stretch of slow-moving water and full of wildlife. We saw another young moose and several eagles. After a few small rapids, we came to a marshy area before entering Round Pond, where we could see Jailbert's camp and the fire tower off in the distance. We paddled toward the tower camp, which is the trailhead for the fire tower hike. It was small and grassy, so we headed to the next camp, Round Pond Rips, which was occupied, as was Turk Island. At this point, we had no choice to continue to paddle. Although I was disappointed in not being able to hike to the fire tower, this stretch of river was really enjoyable. It was fast-moving with a bunch of small rapids. The enjoyment ended abruptly when we arrived at camp at Croquet Brook. It was even grassier and infested with black flies.
Tired and defeated, looks like.
Yeah, right here.
All right, so this is really disappointing. We were supposed to stop at Round Pond so that I could climb the tower trail to a fire tower that overlooks the Allagash. Well, group dynamics happened and the camp for tower wasn't the greatest, so we went to the next one and it was occupied. And somehow one thing led to the next. We're going downriver past rapids. The next camp was occupied. So we got to this kind of a crummy camp. I'm getting torn up by bugs. I've had to put, it's like 90 degrees out, and I got long sleeve pants, socks, bug net, and to top that off, now there's a thunderstorm coming through. So it was a beautiful day on the river, absolutely beautiful day on the river. We saw 3 moose, eagle, a couple eagles I think, but man, this camp sucks, and I'm not going to get to climb that fire tower. Oh well, I have at least Katahdin to look forward to. So I'm going to cook up some dirty rice and sausage, I think, have some coffee, and hopefully the storm will pass and we'll still be able to have a fire and enjoy the night. I don't know about these bugs though.
Motivated to leave camp as quick as possible, we reevaluated our mileage and planned a shorter paddle through the Muskokook Deadwater section, setting up camp just past at Deadwater North.
Bye, with a middle finger.
Got that right.
With Tuesday behind us and a short paddle, we had a bunch of time at camp to nap, read, and enjoy a campfire with Paul's concoction, a hot chocolate toddy. We sat around the fire telling stories.
I'll go.
I've been a raft guide for 8 seasons, and I've been running whitewater since I was 14 years old.
I started rafting in '92 when Terry Sheehan owned the company. And when he sold it in '97, '98, I think. Me and my wife, who got me started into the whitewater rafting with the Venture Calls, we left, and then we met Kevin one day at Yummy's, which is the ice cream store down in Warsaw, and he asked us to guide. And we said, sure, whatever you need us. So I've been guiding probably since, I have to say about '05 maybe.
Yep.
And I started guiding through my friend Jim Redline when he started Sword Valley Rafting.
And just to put that in perspective, I'm 43 years old, so
Right,
he's almost been guiding as long as I've been alive.
right.
You were in diapers.
And Jim Redline started the rafting company, and myself and Dan Schrantz and a couple other friends.
So Jim
We're helping
actually
him.
started it?
Yeah, it's his company right from
Okay.
the beginning.
There was no one there before
We
that.
started with like 4 otters. You could 4 or 5 otters. So
We still got him.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, not these otters. We were maxed out at 20 guests. And the first, I'll never forget the first raft trip we ever ran down through Cattaraugus Creek. We're stopped by the waterfalls, the Hanging Valley, and these other rafts come, and it's Terry Sheehan. And Terry goes, hey, I've got an exclusive here. What are you doing? So he was trying to tell Jim that he had a contract to run Sword Valley, and Jim couldn't do it, which was baloney. And we all became friends over the years,
Yeah.
and still are as far as we know. But the reason I've always paddled and that I'm still paddling is because I love to be on the water
Yep.
more than anything else. Some of the other stuff, like blowing up rafts and carrying rafts and shuttling and everything else, not as much fun as it used to be, but being on the water is still as much fun as it ever was.
Day 7's highlight is Allagash Falls. We paddled from camp to Mishan Farm, where we will sign out of the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. We will then proceed to portage around Allagash Falls. After taking in the falls, we will find camp a little downstream. Today started as good as yesterday ended. We saw a moose upstream from our camp and another during our paddle. The eagles seemed to be following us down the river, making sure we respected their wilderness. The river to the portage was very nice. The days of flat lakes was behind us, and it was all moving water with riffles ahead. We portaged around Allagash Falls using carts. And then hiked to get a better look at the 40-foot Cascades. I was not expecting such a beautiful and powerful waterfall. This was definitely the highlight of the trip. After attaining the rapid to get a better look at the falls, we turned downstream to set up camp at McKean Brook. The final full day on the water. We had a short paddle to our last camp before takeout. It was a challenging paddle through McGargle Rocks as the river levels were getting low, but another quick, enjoyable day on the river, ending at East Twin Brook Camp. Leaving camp on Friday was bittersweet. Our journey was nearing an end as we packed up camp and headed to our final campsite. As we left the Allagash Wilderness Waterway, we got a first glimpse of civilization as we neared camp. We could hear trucks rumble past on the logging road on River Left. We enjoyed the last night, low on provisions, but high on life. Everyone turned in early, eager to make it to takeout. As designed, our final paddle was very short, getting us into the town of Allagash early enough for our outfitter to get us back to the put-in at a decent time. It was sad to break down camp on the last day. The group's spirits were high, and we were all looking forward to breakfast at the Two Rivers Lunch. The coffee was outstanding. I had the Big Moose breakfast special. 3 eggs, 2 meats, hash browns, toast. It was so good, I could have eaten a second plate. They also had Wi-Fi, and I FaceTimed my wife for the first time since put-in. It was weird using technology, but great to see and talk with her. By the time we finished breakfast and several cups of coffee, our shuttle arrived. The owner of the company, Norm, loaded our boats. It was about a 3.5-hour ride back. Norm picked up another driver, Bernie, and we heard all of the Maine gossip and several stories from the past. For me, this trip was incredible. It is the longest paddling trip I have ever been on. The Allagash is a true wilderness waterway. I got to see my first moose and had experiences that will leave an indelible mark on my life. The group is already making plans for our next river adventure. As our journey comes to an end, I reflect on the words of Henry David Thoreau. I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I have several more lives to live and could not spare any more time for that one. I did not know what to expect on this trip. I learned that water flows in the direction of least resistance, and sometimes in life, you need to go with the flow.